I am Michael Bungay Stanier. I am the speaker for the next hour or so, and I am so glad to have you here. So many people rolling in. It's wonderful. It's going to be a great crowd. This is going to be a fun, interactive, practical, provocative hour together. So make sure you got pen and paper handy. We're going to be using the chat box a lot. I mean, a lot. So make sure you got your chat box there and open perhaps. We're going to be setting it so that you can see everybody's comments rolling through. This is a slide-free presentation because I'm quietly confident there's not a single person in the entire universe who's going, the missing gap in my life is not enough PowerPoint slides. And so I'm going to honor that and go, look, we're going to make this really helpful for you. No slides. It's a little bit of handwritten stuff that I'm going to share with you directly to the camera there. But we'll just wait for some more folks to roll in. We've got a really nice starting crowd. It's a few minutes past 12. You know, when I'm facilitating live and, you know, there's always this kind of little bit of a gap between when you're supposed to start and when people are actually ready to start. So as a facilitator, if anybody else is a facilitator here, here's how I manage it. I go, right, we're going to start immediately, but we're starting with a 2-minute break. And that way we kind of go, I don't lose face by starting late. We honor the people who've showed up on time, but we just give people who have just needed to go out and do a little, you know, lunch making or childcare dealing with or putting out a fire, whatever it might be. While we're waiting for the crowd to keep growing, what I'd love you to do in the chat box, just warming your fingers up here. Where are you dialing in from? I know we've got registrants from over 50 countries as part of this amazing wild virtual conference. So where are you dialing in from? Let's see it in the chat box. Bunch of people from locally, I guess, Virginia and Rhode Island, Washington, fantastic upstate New York. There's a very strong East Coast representation here. I'm actually based in Toronto, Canada. So currently I am providing the entire international flavor. Oh no, Kosovo's just come through, so that's fantastic. DC, lovely, Alexandria, South Carolina, Nigeria, welcome, that's fantastic. Mexico, brilliant. Normally Manila, now in Seattle, that's quite the contrast. Oh, somebody who's seen me before from the ATD, so that's very nice. Whoever that person is, I've only got 2 jokes, so you'll be hearing those jokes again during this webinar. So very nice to see people chatting in there, that's fantastic. And I want to just check in with Jen as part of the Wild team. Jen, you know that I've been wanting to have a kind of co-host with me. Who is that co-host? I need somebody's name.
I believe Fiona is going to be joining us.
Fiona, fantastic, brilliant. There's no such thing as too much Fiona McCauley. I'm sure everybody here agrees. So Fiona, that's brilliant. I'm going to have you coming in and out of the conversation with me as we drive people through here. Now, we've got a really nice crowd, 50 people, maybe a few more than that coming through. So here's how we're going to start. We're going to start with a really easy question. And the question is this. On a scale of 1 to 7, I want you to put your chat in the answer box, scale of 1 to 7, how focused do you plan to be in this webinar? How focused do you plan to be? Because, you know, let's face it, webinars are just ripe for distractions. You've got your email handy, you've got your browser open, you're working from home because we're all in social isolation. So I want you to think about yourself and like, what does it mean? Like 1 would mean you intend to be completely distracted through this entire webinar. You've got both your phones going, there's something burning in the corner over there, your kids are painting the other half of your office there, it's chaos, and you're just going to use my dulcet tones as background while you get all that other stuff done. That's a 1. 7, on the other hand, is like, you know what? I'm going to bring laser-like attention here. I'm going to squeeze the value out of this webinar. And you've got your noise canceling headphones in, you've locked the kids in a cupboard, you put the fire out, you put your phone away, whatever it takes for you. And lots of good numbers coming through here, 5s, 6s, and 7s. I love to see all of that. My request is this. You make 1 adjustment to your environment right now that gives you a better chance of hitting the number you're aspiring to hit. I don't mind what it is, whether it's a 4, a 7, a 2. Bless you, Fiona. I'd like you to make one adjustment to your environment. For me, that's shutting down all the windows and putting my phone out of reach. I know if I've got my phone, I'm like, oh, why don't I just check my emails while this thing's going on? And then before I know it, I've lost the webinar. So make one small adjustment before we get going. And Fiona, let me check in with you as my kind of co-host here. What number did you give yourself as a check-in number?
Well, I was busy texting someone, so I heard you in your dulcet tones in the background, but I'm not able to answer the question because I was trying to line up your co-host who is now joining us. But why don't you can you ask someone else the number question for a moment?
Sure.
I'm very caught out.
That's perfect. I totally get that. So we'll wait for my co-host to arrive and then we will, I'll check in with her, but we will, actually, we'll start rolling down the thing. We've got lots of great numbers coming through on the chat box there. I want to talk to you about the power of curiosity and the power of curiosity as an act of leadership. And to do that, we should just start by acknowledging what happens to the brain under a time of stress. Because let's face it, this is a time of anxiety and uncertainty right now. We're all feeling it. And everybody who has shown up here has already got this commitment to be a leader, who's already showing up in their lives as a leader. But at the moment, we are not at our best because that's what happens under a time of stress, a time of anxiety. We just have this pressure that makes our brain suboptimal. And what we would like to do, of course, is to be smarter and wiser people, smarter and wiser people. That's our goal. That's one of the ways we show up as better leaders, be smarter and wiser. But under stress, that's not what's happening to our brain at all. Our focus narrows, our shoulders go up, we stop breathing, the blood and oxygen drains from our prefrontal cortex where we make all those good decisions, and we're now kind of back in the amygdala, our lizard brain. Our lizard brain is all like fight or flight. So we've got that kind of perpetual sense of anxiety that is ticking along and kind of making us uncertain and unsure of ourselves. And what our brain hungers for at a time like right now is certainty. That's what it wants above and beyond all else. It's like, give me certainty. I want to know what's happened, because our brain at the best of times dislikes uncertainty. And at a time like this, when you suddenly discover all the things that you don't really know, that sense of uncertainty is only stronger, is only more apparent. And there's obviously a place for certainty, a place for clear direction. You know, we respond to our leaders when they say, look, let me be absolutely clear. This is the thing you need to do. Social distance is the thing you need to practice. This is the way this is going to unfold. Part of us just loves that. We don't even care if it's right. We just go, oh no, you're giving me certainty. And I really enjoy that. But what I'm going to say is what you want to be finding as a leader is to find the balance between certainty and curiosity. Because at the moment you're tipping, if you're like most people, you're tipping a little too much on the certainty side, and the curiosity part of your brain is shutting down because you're like, well, curiosity is just going to open more questions or more uncertainty, more possibilities and opportunities. And that's not what I want right now. But what I'm going to say to you is that one of the most powerful things you can do as a leader is to be a champion for curiosity, because curiosity is shown to have an impact on you as an individual, help you generate new ideas and new possibilities. It helps teams bring more focus and have more impact in the work that they do. And it helps our organizations be more agile, more innovative, more able to adapt as organizations go through change. So curiosity as a superpower echoes up and down through your organization, to your team, to you, to your organization. So one of the things that I'm known for is being a champion for curiosity. I'm probably best known for a book I wrote. It came out about 4 years ago called The Coaching Habit. It sold a bunch, actually. It's close to 800,000 copies now, which is awesome. Not least because I spent 3 years, and Fiona's showing you that she doesn't have it on her shelf, which is like fantastic. Thank you, Fiona. No, you're killing me here. yeah, I ended up self-publishing it because it got turned down by a publisher for 3 years. So if any of you are like writers and you're like, oh, I want to write a book or I can't get it published, there's hope out there. Self-publishing might be the solution for you. And so for what I do personally, that's my new book, The Advice Trap. So thank you, Fiona, for holding that up. I'm a champion for a very simple to describe, sometimes difficult to do behavior change. And is this: I want you to stay curious a little bit longer and to rush to action and advice giving a little bit more slowly. I'll stick it up there for you. Can you stay curious a little bit longer? Can you rush to action and advice giving a little bit more slowly? And that sounds straightforward in theory, but in practice, that's really difficult because most of you are advice giving maniacs. I mean, you love it. You don't even know what the problem is, but before you know what's happening, you're like, somebody starts talking, and after about 5 seconds, you're like, oh, I know what you need to know. I mean, I don't know what's going on. I don't know you. I don't know the context. I don't know the people you're talking about. I don't know the technical specifications, but nonetheless, I'm pretty sure I have a solution that you should hear and an idea that I should offer and an insight that I feel that should be on the table here. And so a big part of what I try and do is to teach people to be curious by actually learning a fundamental skill. It's really powerful to tame your advice monster. Because you know that advice monster. That's just what I was telling you about. As soon as they start talking, your advice monster exactly looms up out of the dark and goes, oh, I'm going to add some value to this conversation. Yes, I am. Here I go. So we need to learn how to tame your advice monster. And I want to touch on that today, but I want to take us in a slightly different direction in terms of the rest of the session. Here's what I want to tell you about. I want to introduce your advice monster to you. And in fact, your advice monster has 3 different facets to it. And as I tell you the 3 different facets, I want you to listen out. And I want you to listen to hear which of these feels like it might be strongest for you. So the 3 different facets are tell it, save it, and control it. Those are kind of like the 3 different advice monsters. Tell it, save it, and control it. Now, I know you probably figured this out, but let me just explain each one of those to you. Tell it has convinced you that the way you add value, the real way you add value, is to have all the answers. To have all the answers to all the things. All the answers to all the things all the time. And in fact, if you don't have all the answers, then you will fail. I'm sure some of you are like, oh yeah, I get that one, that pressure. You know, it's funny, isn't it? You get promoted into these leadership roles and now you're like, I need to know even more than I knew before. And I didn't even know what I was doing before. Now what's going to happen? If you're feeling that pressure, that's tell it. The second advice monster is save it. Save it's put its arm around you and it said, look, your job is to make sure that nobody struggles, nobody stumbles, nobody fails, nobody has a hard time. In fact, you've got to keep everybody safe. You've got to rescue everybody. That's your job. If anybody stumbles, if anybody struggles at all, you fail. Now, I know some of you are like, oh my goodness, I'm feeling that. I'm feeling that. Some of you, if you're parent, I'm not a parent myself, I'm happily child-free, but I know some of you are parents. I can actually see some of you with kids wandering around. Hi, Fiona's kid there. Some of you are like, oh yeah, I'm feeling that pressure to kind of go, I've got to keep everybody safe. I've got to save everybody. So tell it, I've got to have all the answers. Save it, I've got to save all the people. Control it is number 3, control it. It's convinced you that the only way you win is to maintain your grip on the steering wheel at all time, that white knuckled grip. Because if you let go of control, even for a moment, the chaos will come. You will fail, they will fail, we will all fail, because you can't let anybody else step up or step in or lean in or take control. You've got to hold control from the start, through the middle, right to the end. So there we go. We have tell it, we have save it, we have control it. Here's what I want to see in the chat box. Which of those 3 advice monsters feels most real for you? you've probably got a bit of all three of them coming through, but I really would be curious to know which one feels most real for you. And Catherine, I know that you've been voluntold to be the co-host with me, so congratulations, perhaps. And I'm going to get you to unmute. And Catherine, I'm going to ask you. Nice to meet you, by the way.
Hi.
Which one of those three felt most real for you?
I think probably save it.
Mm-hmm. And how does that show up, do you think, in the way you live? I mean, I'm putting you on the spot. Like, we haven't even met before this moment. So I'm like, you're like, what am I volunteered for? But how do you feel that kind of shows up?
Well, we're both wearing shirts with puppies on them. So I find that to be quite fascinating. I think that it's very difficult for me to see a problem or something that I think could be better without doing something about it. It just completely kerflummoxes me. Why continue suffering?
Yeah, I get that. And you feel that pull. And it's the same with all three of those advice monsters. And it's great watching everybody typing in, because we've got everybody owning all three. There's tell it, there's save it, there's control it in the chat box. There's a few people going, oh man, I'm feeling all three of those. And I think that's absolutely true. I think all of us have all three of those. Here's the trickiness with advice monsters. There are some short-term wins to that behavior, some short-term wins. So Catherine, let me ask you about save it. What would you say the short-term wins are for save it? When you got save it behind the wheel, what plays out?
I mean, number one, I feel like I helped.
Exactly.
I'm a good person.
You're a good person, exactly.
And I also feel like things are moving in a progression that for me seems the correct progression.
Nice, which is actually a little bit of control it sneaking in there. You can hear that in Catherine's word. What else is a good short-term win around when you got save it at the wheel?
You know, the alleviation of suffering.
Perfect. Yeah, so that short-term, you see that kind of like, I think I'm making them feel better.
Yeah.
And I'm making me feel better because I think they're feeling better around that.
Yeah.
So I love all of that. But, you know, there's this idea of where all the prizes, there's also punishments. It's like the pros and the cons. So you see those as short-term wins. What are the longer-term price that you pay, that they pay, that the organization pays for you in save it mode?
I think exactly it's the lack of really collaborating to know where is the energy, where is the movement, what does this group of people or society or community or business that I'm working with, what are their, you know, how do I serve rather than saving?
Beautiful. And that's a really powerful question to ask, which is how do I best serve? And the biggest price there's two big prices that we pay for save it in particular. One is how exhausting it is for you to feel responsible for everybody else's lives. That is the path for burnout, you know, and I'm sure there's plenty of people on the call right now who are feeling it going, oh, I've tried to be that person. And honestly, it's frustrating and it's exhausting and it's never ending. Because in some ways you're like, I'm opening my veins and I'm bleeding into the ground here in service of this person and it's killing me. Here's the other thing, the other price that gets paid is you are stopping people learning, because people learn through the struggle. People learn through the feedback. People learn by bouncing off the walls and kind of nudging themselves a bit. Now, clearly, there's a difference between, as somebody once put it, below the waterline mistakes and above the waterline mistakes. Because part of your job as a leader is to stop the below the waterline mistakes, because then the ship sinks and everybody loses. But that willingness to try and jump in and go, I can't let anybody find difficulty here, is a way of disempowering them, stopping them growing, stopping them learning. You know, somebody once said, wisdom enters through the wound. And if you don't allow those learning moments to happen, nobody gets smarter. They get infantilized, in fact. And indeed, for the other two advice monsters as well, there are both the same kind of prizes and punishments. Short-term wins make you feel good in the short time, often a little bit ego-driven. and longer term costs that you pay, that they pay, that the organization pays for that behavior. Catherine, that was brilliant. Thank you. So how do you tame your advice monster? Well, it's tricky. And I'm not going to dive into it in details here, but I'm going to say this. Curiosity is a superpower. Curiosity is the essence of how you tame your advice monster. Remember, it comes back to this piece to say, if you can stay curious just a little bit longer, and I'm not talking weeks, I'm not talking days, I'm not even talking hours. I'm like, if you can stay curious a little bit longer in like 2 minutes or 3 minutes in a conversation, magic starts to happen. And what I want to do is actually talk about 3 leadership virtues that start to emerge if you can make curiosity an everyday part of the way that you show up. And here are the 3 virtues, as I'm starting to call them, that I'd like to share with you. Mindfulness, empathy, and humility. Mindfulness, empathy, and humility. And I know that each one of those words comes with baggage. I mean, we've all heard of those 3 words before. We've all got our own ideas of what they're about. I want to dive into them. I want to show how curiosity both feeds them and nourishes them. And I want to give you 3 definitions that might be slightly different from what you've heard, that can actually perhaps show how they link together and how they feed each other in a virtuous circle to become a more powerful leader. So let's talk about mindfulness first. And everybody in the chat box, I would love to see this. When I say mindfulness, what's the definition that comes up for you? What do you mean by mindfulness? And Catherine, let me put you on the spot, if I may. What does, when I say mindfulness, how would you define that if you were put on the spot, just like I'm doing?
I would say it's noticing and being aware without being attached or reacting.
Nice. So noticing, being aware without attached and reacting. I think that's a wonderful definition. We've got somebody coming through: thoughtful, intentionality, awareness, being present. I really like that. Aware of the person in the room, the nonverbal, their choice of words. That's really interesting as well around mindfulness. What else for other people? Let me hear your definitions of mindfulness in the chat box, please. It's really part of what we're doing here, of course, is using the wisdom in the room. And we are all in virtual rooms at the moment, but I've got stuff to teach you, but this community of 50, 60, 200 people is really a source of wisdom. And I want to make sure that we draw on this to make the most in terms of helping us learn, helping us innovate, helping us be the leaders that we want to be. So calm, open, listening, centered and grounded in the moment. I love all of this. Taking a pause, not automatic. These are very good definitions. The definition I've got for you builds on this, builds on the definitions that you've got. And I'll just tell it to you now. I think one good definition of mindfulness is being more situationally aware, or more reality aware is another way of putting the same thing. More situationally aware, more reality aware. And let me ask you this, in the context of a leadership conference, which is where we are right now, why would mindfulness and an increased sense of mindfulness be a helpful, useful leadership behavior, leadership skill to have? Again, in the chat box, how would mindfulness actually be helpful? And Catherine, what do you think? What's the benefit of mindfulness as a leader?
I mean, I think it speaks a lot to what those advice monsters are doing, which is reacting, saving, controlling, changing, doing,
Nice.
rather than just receiving, being open and having that curious mind. I wonder if I really understand what this person is saying.
Perfect. So it allows you to be present with that other person. It allows you, and I think this is the killer point that you made. It allows you to be less reactive, because the advice monster is a habit. It's a reaction. It's not a decided course of action. It's just how you respond in the moment. And mindfulness is that heartbeat between stimulus and response. I want to share with you a question that I found particularly powerful around mindfulness. But here's what I'd like to set up with all of you at the moment. I want you to think about a challenging situation that you've got playing out right now. Challenging situation about work or not about work, depending on it, involving yourself, involving other people, involving a tough context, whatever it is for you, I want you to bring that to mind. You probably feel a little bit of a visceral reaction as you think about it, right? Your shoulders go up a little bit, maybe you catch your breath slightly. You're in that kind of slight amygdala state. So you can let that go, shake it out a little bit, take a breath, flood the body with oxygen. That's really nice. Catherine's shown you the way there. I want to share the question that I find is really powerful as a question for guiding mindfulness. And the question that I would want to share with you is this: what do I know to be true? What do I know to be true? And what I'd love you to do, as much as you're willing, because the choice is yours as to how you show up or what you want to share. But when you think about that tough situation, take this moment and in the chat box, if you're willing, share what do you know to be true about this situation? And there are two places you can often look. One is you look at the data that is outside you. What are the facts of the case? What are the things that are I've forgotten the word, that are just unarguable? It is absolutely the thing, the fact, the piece of data. And then the other thing you know to be true is about you and how you react and respond to the situation. So how you're feeling, what judgments you might have, what this means to you. There'll be a degree of truth around that as well. And Catherine, as I put you on the spot, and again, it's entirely up to you how far or what you want to share. When you think about the challenge that came to mind for you, what do you know to be true about that?
That there are situations that I can't solve and I can't save.
Nice.
And
yeah,
it's really painful to live through.
Yeah, that shrug is very expressive. It says a lot. If I may ask, what else do you know to be true?
That I am lucky to be together with other people that all want the best
Nice
outcome.
Yeah.
Regardless of how that might seem at any moment.
Exactly. That's really helpful, because what Catherine's pointing us to, I think, is one of the things that becomes or might become apparent to you as you ask yourself, what do I know to be true? Is actually how much of this situation is your interpretation of a small amount of data. So often when you look at a situation, there just isn't that much, there aren't that many factual things that you can name. You know, like 3, 4, 5. And then there's a swirl of stuff that you have interpreted, assumed, made up, kind of predicted. And all of that is not the truth. That's just your judgments, that's your feelings, that's your opinions, that's your hypotheses based on the data that you have. And why this is so powerful in terms of a mindfulness piece is it helps you separate out judgment from data, opinion from fact. And by doing that, you have a better chance of being less reactive and less responsive and less advice driven and less advice monster driven. So let me check in with you right now, again, in the chat box, and it's really rich. This chat is going to be a great resource for people, so make sure you keep looking at that. But I'm just curious to know right away, from that first insight around mindfulness and that question, what do I know to be true? What, if anything, was useful or valuable about that for you right away? And Catherine, let me put you on the spot, if I may. What was useful or valuable for you around that little piece?
Sorry, which?
The piece around just sharing that insight around mindfulness and the power of that question.
I think it did stimulate this idea of what do we ever actually know?
Right.
How much fact is there ever?
Yeah.
Then
beautiful. Yeah, it is constantly stunning to me how much I make up based on how little data there's actually there. And as soon as I see that, I start seeing how much of my own coloring is part of the situation, which allows me to take responsibility for my share of what's going on. And that can be a powerful act in itself.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the second of the three virtues. So mindfulness is number one, and that's being more other aware. The second, more situationally aware. The second virtue is empathy. And I'd be curious to know from this smart group, when I say empathy, how do you define empathy? So again, in the chat box, let me ask you, how, if I put you on the spot, how do you define empathy at the moment? And whilst we're waiting for some chat box to flow through, Catherine, what does empathy mean to you?
I think empathy means putting myself in somebody else's shoes to the best of my ability, putting myself in somebody else's space, trying to understand from their point of view, not from my point of view or my opinion.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's a really common metaphor that people use around empathy, putting yourself in another person's shoes. And of course, there's that great joke, which is like, if you really want to understand your enemy, walk a mile in their shoes, because then you'll be a mile away from them and you'll have their shoes. Perfect. So I'm loving this, and there's lots of great definitions flowing through: understanding and caring, seeing and feel in my soul, understanding and realizing others' points of view, feeling their pain. So all very good. Let me give you a definition, and you can see how it builds on the mindfulness definition. If mindfulness is more situationally aware, then I think empathy is more other aware, other aware. You know, I love the work of a guy called Martin Buber, a philosopher. And he says, look, there are just two types of relationships in this world. There's I-it relationships and I-thou relationships. And I-it relationships are where it's become transactional, where it's become slightly dehumanized, where you start seeing the other person for what they can do for you. Whereas I-thou relationships are where you remember and you connect with the kind of full, complicated, glorious messiness of the human person in front of you, which means, of course, you get to connect with your own glorious, messy connectedness as well. So the question, under stress, under anxiety, under uncertainty, we will tend to default away from empathy because it's too much effort to try and walk a mile in their shoes, be in another person's shoes. We kind of get a little self-centered about survival because that's the way our brain is wired. And so it can take a real effort to kind of reconnect back to that other person. It can also, but one of the most powerful things that you can do as a leader is to build relationships that are clear and clean and strong and resilient and transparent. And I want to share with you a question that I think is remarkable for helping keep relationships clean. And by doing that, connect with the empathy of the other person, or rather be empathetic with that other person is a better way to put it. And the question that I would share with you is this: what needs to be said that hasn't been said? Now, I manage, as part of my businesses, I manage two teams. And, you know, I talk to Shannon, who's the CEO of Box of Crayons. We formally talk once a month. I talk to Ainsley, who's chief making stuff happen person at mbs.works, and we talk on a daily basis, but formally on a weekly basis as a kind of check-in. And for all of those kind of more formal meetings, we have introduced that question as the way to complete those conversations, because I'm not that great at conflict. I don't like it that much. And what I will tend to do, this is kind of the save it monster in me or the rescuer in me, is if something's slightly off, something slightly annoying, something's like not quite right, but it's not terrible, it's just slightly off, I'll tend to swallow it rather than put it on the table. And of course, those little things become irritants over time. They become bigger cracks over time. And being committed to keeping the relationship cleaned up is what I try and do. So what I found is asking that question, what needs to be said that hasn't been said, as a formal part of a formal check-in, is a very powerful way for that unspoken stuff to have space to show up and arrive on the table. So here's what I want you to do. I want to make this real for all of you. When you think of that difficult situation that you're thinking about before, and you think about the person involved, because, you know, let's face it, there's always another person involved. For you, what needs to be said that hasn't been said? And Catherine, if I can put you on the spot, and again, you can opt out of this. You're like, Michael, I'm just not going to tell you. But is there a way that something comes to mind for you where you're like, here's the thing that needs to be said that hasn't yet been said?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm gonna have something there.
Yeah, sure, no problem. It's for me, it's like a little radar thing into my soul. Ping, ping, just going, all right. I have an optimistic confirmation bias. I'm like, I'm just going to assume it's amazing and that everything's perfect and nothing's broken. And that is great in lots of ways. It carries me a long way, but it also means that I can sometimes miss some of the subtle signs of breakage or just stress. And asking that question allows Shannon and I and Ainsley and I to talk about what matters. And it's not always about the broken stuff either. Often it's an opportunity to be appreciative of each other. And we might not have just got round to being as fully as appreciative as we might have thought. So some nice things going into the chat box there. So I appreciate people sharing that. We're kind of surged into this place of kind of open-hearted vulnerability without kind of really setting it up as well as I might have. So for those of you who are willing to share, that's fantastic. And those of you who are like, I'm not up for sharing, that's fantastic as well. I just want you to take this question, if it's helpful and useful for you, and you're like, yeah, I'll think about that. I'll potentially use that. So mindfulness, more reality aware or more situationally aware. Empathy, more other aware. Let's go to the third virtue, which I'm calling humility or being humble. And when you hear that, because that's a word that's been around for a long time, it has some spiritual connections for some of us. How do you define humility? What do you think of when I say humility? And again, let's see your wisdom in the chat box, if I may. And Catherine, what comes up for you? How do you define humility?
You know, it's interesting because what came up for me was understanding, knowing that I don't know, being aware that I don't know.
Nice.
And that's it.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Being aware that I don't know. Thinking about empathy.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I love that.
How can I be empathetic? How much can I put myself in the position of someone who I'm working with on a project, who lives in a country, who, you know, et cetera, all the stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, beautiful. And lots of great definitions coming through the chat box. Another one, I trust the other person. I'm not self-serving, not leading with ego, humbleness, right? So being humble, self-aware, asking more questions, gratitude for the strength of others. There's a lot of great stuff there. One of the things that and other people have written about this as well, which is sometimes when you talk about humility, there's a way that it comes with a sense of lowering oneself or abasement. You know, it's just like, oh, no, I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy enough, whatever it might be. And I'm not up for that at all. I think the definition that works for me around humility is actually more self-aware. And in fact, Catherine's definition reflects that, which is like, how would I know that? I don't know that. That's a moment of self-awareness. And now you can see how these three definitions can work together: more situationally aware, more other aware, more self-aware. What you're doing as a leader is you're becoming just more aware of all the component parts of the system. Because you remember that what I want as an outcome here is for you to become smarter and wiser in a time of stress and anxiety, and greater awareness, better understanding of what reality is, what's going on for the other person, what's going on for yourself, is the powerful place to be, a powerful platform on which to stand to make better, smarter, wiser decisions. So being more other aware. And let me ask you this, and this will be easy for you because you're all smart leaders already. How would this sense of humility, a sense of greater self-awareness, how does that help in terms of being a more effective leader? Because, you know, you could probably make the argument that, quite frankly, you could be a great leader and not be self-aware at all. You just charge on down and, you know, take no prisoners sort of thing. So for you, Catherine, how does more self-awareness, more sense of how would I know this, how does that help you show up as a better leader, do you think?
I think that really high functioning teams are what really make things happen in a sustainable way. And that having those three characteristics really helps to empower teams, really helps to build momentum because people are empowered. Yeah.
Very nice.
And things spin out of control in a fantastic way, hopefully.
Yeah, beautiful. So, and some nice stuff supporting that coming through in the chat box as well. You get better solution. It gives other people's voices power. All of this is wonderful. And what you're seeing, I think, in some of these definitions is how empathy supports humility and awareness, and mindfulness. Mindfulness supports humility and empathy. They're three virtues that feed on each other, and also three virtues that they kind of cancel out each other's blind spots. Because there's a way that for both mindfulness and empathy and humility, each one of those comes with its own blind spots, but combined as a threesome, you start to eliminate some of those blind spots and you just become smarter and wiser. Let me give you the question that I think is powerful for humility. And it's a bit provocative. It's not the question that you might be expecting, but I think if you go with me and you go, okay, that Michael's definition of humility is an interesting one and self-awareness is powerful. What I want is that self-awareness to allow you to show up as the best version of yourself. So ironically, or slightly contradictory perhaps, humility is I get to show up playing to my strengths. So the question I would have for you connected to humility is, who am I at my best? Who am I at my best? Here's what I can promise you. When your advice monster has you by its control, that's not you at your best. But when you think about what you know to be true about you, when you connect to that self-awareness of how you show up at your very best, who am I at my best? And I'm going to really encourage you to put that in the chat box. It's going to feel a little bit like, oh, I'm blowing my own trumpet. Can I do that? It's like, damn right. This is exactly the place to be doing exactly that. So now's the place for you to kind of own your glory. Who am I at my best? I'd love to see that in your chat box. Step up to it. No need for false modesty here. And Catherine, who are you at your best?
I am a really enthusiastic, energetic person.
Nice.
That asks good questions.
Beautiful.
And helps to motivate people to find their own way.
Nice. Yeah, that's wonderful. And I could just, I'm like, I kind of don't want to say anything for a moment, just to let that land and have a couple of beats, because it's like cool to hear you say that. And look at some of the lovely stuff that's coming through in the chat box. Calm, engaged, positive, listening, supporter. I'm at my best when I bring out the best in others. Committed and my brightest. Creativity with lots of a sense of humor. So I support that. That's fantastic. This is a really powerful moment to go, who am I at my best? And it does feel slightly contradictory to that, how we normally think of humility, which is that sort of, oh, let me hide my light. I'm like, no, you can absolutely serve others by being a role model, by being a champion, and being a light that doesn't diminish their light, but actually helps theirs to shine even more. So very nice comments coming through. That's close to what I wanted to teach you. I mean, we've been going for about 50 minutes. And I've actually covered quite a lot in that time. Here's what I would love you to do. You know, when you step back and you think about what we've talked about, the brain under stress, how we respond under stress, the power of curiosity, the definition of being more coach-like, which is, can you stay curious a little bit longer? Can you rush to action and advice giving a little bit more slowly? The three advice monsters, tell it, save it, control it. And then these three leadership virtues, empathy, humility, and mindfulness, and the questions associated with them. here's what I want you to pull back as a group. And I was like, individually, out of all of that, what was most useful or most valuable here for you? What was most useful or most valuable here for you? And in the chat box, I'd love to see what's really striking a chord with you, in part because I'm curious, but in part because I know this will help this learning stick with you. So I'm asking this as much in service of you as I am for me. Catherine, what's landed for you? What's felt most useful or most valuable here for you?
I really liked hearing about curiosity in the beginning, and then just thinking how I need to be curious about myself. To be empathetic, I need to be curious about other people. I need to be curious about the situation. And
Beautiful.
that, you know, that save it monster that wants to know the answer, although it's the control monster too. Yeah, you know, that the humility piece, I need to know what I don't know. So it just kept circling back to curiosity and questioning.
Nice. So for all of you who are like, just like Catherine, perhaps going, oh, that advice monster's really taken my fancy. I will say this, on one of the websites I have, theadvicetrap.com. So the name of the new book, theadvicetrap.com, there's actually a little questionnaire. It's about 20 questions. And you can take it and find out which of the 3 advice monsters is strongest in you. I know you've all got your hypotheses that you typed them in earlier on, but if you'd like to go and check it out and go, wow, what is my advice monster? Which is the real one that shows up? You get a little report with some tactics and some solutions and some insights around that. So if you want to go to theadvicetrap.com and test out your advice monster, the invitation is there. It's absolutely free. So lots of great stuff coming through. The empathy question, what needs to be said, staying curious a little bit longer, move to action and advice a little slower from somebody there. That's really nice. Fiona's typed in the URL there, so thank you. Understanding the brain under stress. So lots of good stuff coming through. Hey, Jen, I know that our plan is to move people into small discussion groups. So there's a chance to debrief this session. And there's also a chance in these smaller groups to have a conversation around what happens now. Because here's what everybody's at risk at. When you come to a high quality experience like this, and you have all sorts of awesome people talking, you can get overfilled with content. And what that can sometimes lead to is being paralyzed in terms of how you act. And that is just a tragic waste of time and money and resources, because what this world needs and why Fiona puts on this conference is to create action. So what we're going to do, and Jen's going to set this up for you, I'm going to hand it over to her in just a second, is put you into small groups of 5 to have a conversation about what was most useful and most valuable, but also for you to start articulating, so what's going to be different? What will you do now that is new? What will you do that's different? And here's why I want to do this. I know who's speaking this afternoon. It's Aisha Bursell, and she is brilliant. And you need to clear the cache of your head from this experience so that you can go to Aisha's session and be ready for her, because she's going to teach you how to design your leadership. She is a genius. She's delightful. And I need you to be fully present and fully open to what she's got to share. And if you don't go to these rooms now and kind of do that work to process this, debrief it, your brain's going to be too full of Michael to have room for Aisha. And honestly, you should make room for Aisha. That's a priority. So here's what I want to do. First of all, I want to hand it to Fiona, and then we'll hand it to Jen to break things up. Fiona, what do you want to say as the kind of final comments or reflections on what you've been hearing?
Well, I definitely feel like if there was a big light bulb above my head, it would be emphasizing like the stay curious, be your best self in every situation, particularly when the stakes get high and the emotions get even stronger with me. The other thing that's coming to, and I'd love to know for others on the chat, like what's coming up for you. What do you feel like it's in the light bulb above your head? And the second thing that's coming up for me is just a huge thank you, Michael. This is such a busy, crazy time. And for you to have immediately said like, yes, I'd love to share my expertise with the Wild Network is so meaningful to me. So I really want to thank you for that.
My pleasure.
And I can just tell from how engaged people are in the chat and all the names that we see there, that this has been really meaningful to other people.
Yeah, it's been wonderful to have such an interactive group. So thank you everybody around that. And Jen, I think we're going to hand it over to you now to help people split into smaller study groups. So over to you, Jen.
Okay. Maybe I'll just go ahead and jump in and say that Jen, the amazing Jen behind the scenes, is going to just magically put us into small groups. So we'll be in small groups of 5. And those groups will be set up for 20 minutes. So until about 1:20. You don't have to stay in that group the whole time, but we invite you to stay on just so we can have this opportunity, as Michael said, to process what we've learned, to help make it stick with us as a new behavior, and to have a chance to engage with some members of the Wild community, because this is a great group of women and men that we have on the call. And
Catherine, we've got to say thank you to Catherine for jumping in there. You're awesome, Catherine, and you did great. Thank you very much.
So can I have a big round of virtual applause for Michael and for Catherine? Thank you both so much. We're so grateful. Woohoo! And also I want to extend a thank you to WBEX, who is providing the technology in support of our webinar today. WBEX, an ethical coach, thanks to you.
Become a member of the Wild community by registering for the Women in Global Development Leadership Forum happening virtually on October 26th. You can visit our website, www.wildleadershipforum.org, to register today. And a special thank you to our sponsors.